Today marks 1 week of street protests across Iran that have erupted in the wake of a death of a young woman in police custody. 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was arrested by the feared morality police last Tuesday for allegedly violating Iran's strict Islamic dress code. Later that same day, she was taken to the hospital. 3 days later, officials announced she had died, claiming she had a pre-existing condition and suffered a heart attack. Amini's family denies that she was ill. They say witnesses told them she was beaten by police. Protests began outside the hospital after the announcement of her death, and they have since spread to nearly 90 cities and towns around the country. Demonstrations are now among the largest since the Green Movement in 2009, which were sparked by the official re-election of hardliner President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Jasmine Ramsey was born in Iran, is the deputy director of the Center for Human Rights in Iran, and she joins me now. Jasmine, I'm curious to start with a sense of the scope, the scale of these protests, which do seem to be touching lots of different parts of the country in places large and small. How would you characterize what we're seeing a week into this protest movement?
They're so widespread, really every part of society has joined them, of all ages, of all socioeconomic classes. We're seeing young women walking in the streets, removing their hijabs, and grandmothers doing the same thing. And it's not just in the bigger cities and towns, it's also happening in small villages.
Why now? Obviously, the sort of virtue police, as they've been called, the morality police, have been a mainstay of the government of Iran since the revolution in 1979. Quite notable, quite feared, often sort of pointed to by critics to represent the sort of apotheosis of this kind of authoritarian form of theocracy. Why now, and why this death, do you think, has set off this reaction?
Well, this protest is unique and a powerful force on the streets, but it's part of years and years of a protest movement in Iran that's been growing and touching all parts of the country, demanding social and political change. One of the chants we hear on the streets is "Join us, or you'll be the next Mahsa." And I think that really speaks to why these protests are so widespread. People are expressing rage at living under the thumb of an authoritarian government that does not allow any space for people to air their grievances or voice their demands. And that's why you're seeing this kind of anger spilling into the streets.
Obviously, there have been uprisings before. There have been protests, the Green Movement, which I noted before. Sometimes those protest movements have been channeled into more reformist parties and reformist candidates, although often those have found themselves delisted for election by hardliners in the Supreme Council. Where do you see this going right now? Is this sort of a normal blowing off of steam and airing of grievances, or is there something deeper here in terms of the stability of the regime?
There's nothing normal about this. There's nothing normal about people coming out into the streets and risks their lives to voice their demands. It's truly amazing to see what's happening there. And where this goes really depends on the extent of force that the government uses to repress them. In 2019, where there were massive protests all around the country, hundreds were killed, thousands were arrested. Just today, Judiciary Chief Ejei said that arrests were being taken as a preventative action. So this kind of force is truly repressive and violent, and that's why we're calling on world leaders to speak out against this, especially leaders that have direct channels of communications with Iranian officials, European officials, Asian countries, African countries. Call on the Iranian government to allow peaceful protests, to allow people to voice their demands and stop opening guns on them.
Have we seen breaks in terms of, obviously Iran's government is complicated and in some senses heterogeneous. There are different politicians. Have we seen breaks or internal dissension among elected officials or leaders about the protest movement or about the reaction to it?
I mean, right now, what you're seeing is the government working hard to repress these protests. And I think that's the thing that we need to be paying attention to. when you have the judiciary chief, the president, speaking as though these people are all enemies of the state, thousands and thousands of people are enemies of the state. It's a very worrying trend. And that's why we need to keep the spotlight on Iran. And also, we should work to help Iranians access the internet. Today, President Biden issued General License G1, and now we hope that there will be follow-up with the many tech companies around the world that are not allowing Iranians to use digital services and communication tools that would help them circumvent the kind of blackout internet that's in Iran by the government right now.
One of the things as we look at this video here of women burning their hijab in a fire, which is a sort of remarkable image. Just talk a little bit about the centrality of women and particularly their rage at the Islamic dress code that is enforced by the state and the leadership role they've taken in these protests.
Right. So women have been part of protests in Iran since the revolution. My own mother helped organize one of the largest demonstrations shortly after the compulsory hijab law was introduced. And now you're seeing these women risking their lives really to say that they don't want the hijab to be forced on them. It's very important to note that the kind of anger that you're seeing, that you're showing on the screens right now, it's a result of the Iranian government turning the hijab into a tool of political repression instead of a choice as it should be. It's pitting Iranians against one another. Forces are being faced with shooting at civilians. And that's why Iranian people are refusing to back down. They really don't want to live in this kind of climate, security climate anymore.
Jasmine Ramsey, who herself was born in Iran. Your mother, that's an amazing anecdote about your mom organizing that protest. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.